You're listening to the Vocal Advancement Podcast, and I am one of your hosts, Tom, joined by my lovely host, Heather. Hello.
Well, hello, everybody.
How's it going today?
It's going well. I'm a bit warm at the moment. I've put my hot jumper on, and now I'm getting a bit sweaty. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I do apologise if I go a bit shiny.
We're working into spring, hopefully.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we promised we wouldn't talk about the weather, Tom, but we've already started talking about the weather.
Well, I just said spring.
I'm going to slap myself.
I'm not saying anything else. It's almost spring. So hopefully looking forward to warmer weather. Sweater weather.
I did say to Tom, I was saying to Tom the other day, I was watching back some of our episodes and I'm like, we do talk about the weather a lot. Honestly, I know we're British and all, but the weather talk, we've got to cut that out. You don't need to know whether it's sunny or rainy here.
I know.
Maybe you want to. Maybe you want a weather report with Heather and Tom every week.
Now the weather, featuring Heather.
I'm sure you'd much rather hear about other things.
Yeah.
Have you done anything exciting this week, Tom?
I have. We are in the middle of finalising our Evacon schedule just now. So we're working on that. So I'm just looking at it thinking, there's too many classes. I want to go to all of these things.
Do you know, I saw the working schedule and I was thinking the same thing. There are certain, kind of time slots where I'm like, but there are 3 options and I want to see all 3 of them.
I know.
And I'm like, thank goodness all the classes get filmed so that I actually can.
I know, you don't have to run from room to room taking snippets.
Yeah, I was going to say, do the first 10 minutes in this room, the next 10 minutes in the next room, I'm not sure that's the best way to deal with it, is it?
No. But yeah, I'm looking, I'm like, it's a different schedule from what we usually do. Like, we've invited a lot more people to present on kind of elective topics, as we call them. And so, I've been working on that and just excited about it, thinking about what to put in swag bags. Ooh.
Fun. That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
The goodie bags.
Especially when you go to all the companies like, we're making up swag bags for a conference, and you suddenly get all these samples and you're like, oh, nice.
So I like it.
I know, I need to find...
Now I'm intrigued. I want to see all the swag.
Well...
You'll have to show me later.
You end up going to places and you're like, we're thinking about putting a bottle of wine in each bag, but I'd literally need to taste it. Yeah, we didn't like it, but thanks for the sample.
All the endless opportunities.
I know. As the episodes progress, I'll just slowly be surrounded by swag.
By freebies.
Free swag. If only it was that glamorous. The reality is much starker. I'm liking the idea of a free bottle of wine in your swag bag. I know. Maybe we should have special swag bags.
Just for us.
Yeah.
I'll have a bottle of red, thanks.
Great. I'll have a box of red.
A box.
Well, it's going to last the whole week. And, share with friends.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
So we've got a guest today, haven't we, Tom? Who's on today's podcast?
We do, yes. So we have a kind of different topic from what we've discussed so far. We have Dr. George Musgrave, who is from Goldsmith University, and he talks about musicians' mental health and well-being and what it's like to be in the music industry and how that affects musicians and their well-being.
Yeah. He co-authored a book called Can Music Make You Sick? Which gives you a taste of what the sorts of questions that he has been asking in his research, whether being a musician could potentially be detrimental for your health in some way.
And he has an interesting background because he's not just an academic talking about the topic. He actually was a signed artist to Sony Records for 12, 13 years as a rapper. So he actually has kind of first-hand knowledge of what it's like to be in the music industry and working. And so it gives him I think a unique perspective on the topic.
Definitely. I think we should go and speak to him, don't you, Tom?
Yeah, let's do it. So George, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. We are really looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better. But maybe we can start with something nice and easy. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your kind of journey you've been on so far.
Yeah, sure. So my name is George Musgrave. So I research the way that musicians psychologically and emotionally experience building their careers, with a focus predominantly on mental health and well-being in the music industry. And that's focused on like the popular music industry, or the music industry, like as it might be colloquially referred to. So kind of specializing in genres related to kind of like pop or rap or EDM, dance music and stuff like that. That's the kind of world that I know. And alongside that, I write more broadly about the way that musicians experience career building and the notion of working conditions in the music industry. So written about things like ethical decision making by music managers, particularly after the death of Avicii, written about universal basic income and how the arts are subsidized, various things like this. And I suppose probably the topic which was kind of most well known of mine, which I did with Sally Ann Gross in the UK, was called "Can Music Make You Sick?", which was about instances of anxiety and depression amongst creative workers in the music industry in the UK. And this was a kind of quite a massive project at the time, so I think it was kind of a bit of a turning point in the way that people discussed and thought about mental health in the music industry. And in that sense, it led to some really cool stuff and very impactful and powerful stuff. The launch of some helplines and things like Music Minds Matter helpline by the charity Help Musicians was launched as a result of that project. I'm currently working with Sally on a project that's similar but different in Denmark. You know, what does mental health amongst musicians look like in the second happiest country in the world? I'm talking about interventions in Denmark to help musicians there too. And all of this is kind of informed by the fact that, like, I used to be a rapper signed to Sony. Well, I was signed to Sony until actually a few months ago, but I just got out of that deal because I don't really need to be in it. I don't really write rap songs anymore. I don't have so many good things to rap about when you're my age and you have breakfast in Gales. It was better when I used to go to Wetherspoons in my 20s and lived in a small town. So it was kind of informed a lot by that stuff. So like in my career, before I got my record deal, I was like the first act without a deal to be on the MTV brand new list, which was a list that was like every year MTV do it. It's like the BBC Sound Of list. So the year I was on it, it was like me, Charlie XCX, Lana Del Rey, like massive people. But obviously I didn't go on to be massive, but that's okay. And then, I got signed. I worked with, the music that I did was like, it's like laddish rap. So I did songs with like Mike Skinner of the Streets, if people know him. And, worked with I had like Ed Sheeran in my music videos and stuff like this. That's something that people often like quote about me. And then I performed at like Reading Festival, Leeds, Wireless, BBC Radio 1's Big Weekend, and was kind of supported by like Ellie Goulding, Plan B, various people like that. So I had like a good little run, I guess, for a bit, and then I kind of stopped that like 2015, 2016. And moved into being an academic full time. So I write about the music industry, but I also have like lived, I haven't been Drake, but like I've lived within it. So I understand musicians' lives a bit like from within. And that's kind of one of the reasons
really a unique combination you've got going on there, because most academics come from academia and spend their entire lives in academia and looking from the outside in. It's really unique to get an insider perspective on things.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of, I've tried to use it very much like as an advantage. Like, of course, to an extent, you could say like, well, I'm not like objective about it. I don't even know what being objective means. It's more like a continuum, I think, anyway. And plus, it's like, there are certain like even methodologically, there's some populations that are kind of like harder to access, and like so it's like when I interview and speak to musicians for projects and things, like we speak the same language. Like even if I'm speaking to ones who are like number one in 5 countries, like I've never been at that level, but I know what it means to like do studio sessions for years and try and get cuts on album placements and do all this stuff. Like I do know that life, so that does kind of. I think we are all like in the work that we do with like the scholarly and the personal are intertwined. And I think there's this question of like being scientifically objective and like all these things. I think it like masks the fact that most people do research and write about the thing that they are personally interested and inspired by. It's just the extent of that personal influence might not be quite so, they might not have lived it perhaps in the way I've lived it, but we all write about the things we love and care about,
Absolutely. So you did a class for us online, and unfortunately I wasn't able to be there live, but I watched it back afterwards, and can I tell you, you took me on quite the emotional journey during that class.
Okay.
I felt like I went through every stage of, when people are mourning death and they're like, oh, anger, and then, and then acceptance. And, I went through that journey with this whole topic over, is making music going to make you feel happy? Is it going to make you a happier person? And I just want, and I'm sure you understand exactly the journey I was going on. Yeah. Because everybody everywhere is yelling from the rooftops that making music is good for the soul, good for the heart, good for the lungs, good for the everything. And we've had guests on our podcast before that have been talking about that side of things. But you came to present a very different angle on the topic, and I just wondered whether you could just express some of that to our listeners now, maybe force them to go through the same journey I did.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a slightly condensed one. That was like an hour's class, maybe, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, broadly what this is about is that, like, it's not me, like, critiquing any of those arguments at all. Like, there is good evidence for many of the things that you're saying, but the way I kind of framed it is like this. It's like, one of the most predominant arguments that you hear now around this relationship between like music and health, and arts and health more broadly, is that it's really good for us. So, there's a report that just came out recently called like Culture for Health, which the European Union put out, which is basically we want people to make music, to paint, to sing, to dance, to engage in creative pursuits because they're good for us, basically. And you find evidence in studies that are from, singing in groups, singing in choirs, drumming in groups, all kinds of things with various different populations, which are kind of seeking to demonstrate the well-being benefits of that kind of musical engagement. Now, I have a few problems with some of this, but some of these things are like methodologically like a bit woolly, and like what it is that they're based on is slightly woolly. They're often like also based on very, very specific populations. So like the singing in groups and stuff is often amongst like the elderly with dementia, where singing and listening to music does help them remember to a number of things and does have health and well-giving properties. I'm not debating that, I'm not saying they don't. What I do is I contrast that by saying that much of that literature is focused on individuals for whom music making is not a career orientation. It is music making for whom simply the act of music making is the source from which they derive pleasure. It's elderly people singing in choirs. They're not trying to be Taylor Swift. They're just singing in choirs. Now, what I contrast that with is I say that sits extremely uncomfortably alongside a bunch of literature which is suggesting that musicians may have elevated levels of mental ill health amongst that population, elevated levels of anxiety, depression. Again, we could problematize some of the methodologies, including methodologies I use. It's fine to problematize them. There are some kind of fairly undeniable statistics from some of this, particularly around like suicide, and the suicide statistics for musicians across the world are extremely high. I mean, only male construction workers, sometimes like deep sea fishermen, like come out as having higher levels of mortality than musicians. So there is a large level of suffering amongst this occupational group. I think that's fairly clear. Now, you can debate where that suffering might come from. Some people say it's personality factors. They'll say there's a musical temperament. Music attracts people with a certain level of emotional vulnerability or a certain level of attunement. Maybe, maybe not. There are also other people. The work that I've tended to do has often tried to perhaps emphasize, perhaps is maybe the right word, is the working conditions of what it is like to try and build a life as a musician, when the notion that we should all and can all participate as music makers with very low barriers to entry, where you can record on GarageBand and a free microphone and you work hard enough and hustle and use TikTok and get your music on YouTube and you'll be Rihanna as well. What does that feel like? How do musicians experience that? And how do they come to terms with the very challenging reality that many of them will not be Rihanna? I was not Drake. That is not the reality for the vast majority. The vast majority of musicians struggle profoundly to build an audience online because everybody can do it. They struggle profoundly to be heard because everyone is speaking at once. And they struggle profoundly to monetize their creativity. Income data from musicians show that they earn appalling incomes. Now, What we've tried to do is to, me and others, and work that I've done with Sally Gross and work that I've done separately as well, is to try and say these two things are very sit uncomfortably together. The data which shows that it's really good for your well-being on one hand, and data which shows that musicians are suffering on the other. Now, this has a number of moving parts to it too, because music careers are not only a source of suffering. That's reductive and silly. They are also a source of immense joy and a source of immense well-being for people. There's empirical data showing that. There's a study called Performers of the Night by this guy called Kegeliers, which measures that well. We've found that in studies we've done in Denmark. We know that they are not only destructive, like obviously. However, there are a number of stresses in them, which are a profound source of anxiety in many musicians' lives. And we hear that when we speak to them, because there is a great deal about trying to develop a career as a musician, which is extremely painful in lots of ways. It provides a number of benefits: self-confidence, joy, togetherness, friendship, all of that stuff. That's not up for debate. But it is also an immense struggle. And what the work that I've tried to do is to say that we need to confront this notion of what it does to people when we encourage them to dream dreams which can be nightmares on occasion. They can be immensely challenging for people, and certain groups experience them as immensely challenging specifically. You look at the challenges that women face trying to build careers in music, the misogyny, the sexism, their exclusion from places of power, their experience in places like recording studios, their vulnerabilities online when they're forced to share vulnerabilities of themselves and their bodies. Let's not pretend this is a wonderful, happy place where you should become a musician because it's going to improve your well-being. If you want to improve your well-being, trying to make a career as a musician is a bad way of trying to do it. That's not the best way to do it. If you want to improve your well-being...
Do you think that's easier to see once you get older? Do you think that's easier to see from a perspective of age and wisdom and you see, I look at those lifestyles now and go, oh God, I couldn't think of anything worse than to put myself through that. But a 16-year-old is looking at it fully through rose-tinted glasses, where all they're seeing is the highlights, the exciting parts. It's like they're blanketing themselves from the potential misery that lifestyle might afford.
Well, this is what dreaming is. I mean, we want young people to dream. You need people in a way. If you want to be a musician, you need to dream an unrealistic mental dream. Like that's what you watch the Kanye West documentary on Netflix, and you watch the level of delusion in that guy as he is a nobody, and he walks into record labels in New York City and says, "I'm going to be Kanye West," and they're like, I don't know who Kanye West is. I don't know what that means. But he needs that level of insanity to become the superstar that he has become, because you don't want to stop people dreaming. Like you want people to dream. And you want to encourage young people to dream because they want to be who they want to be. They want that self-actualization and that identity, and they want all of that stuff. But we just had a paper that's just been published, and it's called The Dark Side of Optimism. And that's saying that there is a sense in which sometimes some forms of optimism can be cruel because they keep you tethered to a life which is unrealizable and which is wholly problematic and extremely challenging to sustain. There is lots about being a musician that's wonderful. I know this personally. Everybody listening to this knows this. There is a lot that's wonderful. We cannot pretend that there isn't. But for too long, particularly in the popular music industry, there has been this argument which says, come and be a musician. It's great. It's sexy. It's glamorous. You can go on tour. You can pose on Instagram at a swimming pool on the roof of Soho House in White City. And, you can stump backstage at the Brits and get free clothes, and it's going to be a real laugh. Well, some of it is a laugh, but some of it is not a laugh. Some of it is very real, and some of it is toxic, and some of it is damaging and harmful to people. And we have tried to show both sides of the coin, perhaps slightly more loudly emphasizing the negative because that's the work that we do, but showing both sides of that coin because it's important that both sides are shown.
Yeah, that makes me think of the Lewis Capaldi documentary on Netflix, I think it is, and when you see him going through the pressure of trying to follow up the album. So how much do you think the industry puts or contributes to this?
Well, when you say the industry, it's important to break that down a little bit. What we have found in studies that we have done is when you ask musicians, do you see music as your main career? Yes or no? The musicians that see music as their main career have worse mental health outcomes than those that don't. Now, what that means is that it is the act of seeing, subjectively believing. It's got nothing to do with income. It doesn't correlate to income in any way. The statistics don't match. It has nothing to do with what you earn. It has nothing to do with whether it's over 50% of your income. It has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is, do you believe this to be your job? Because if you do, and therefore by extension, that means you are engaging to some degree with features of the popular music industry. You might not be signed to a label, but you might be uploading your music on Spotify and trying to get people to listen. That means you're engaging with a feature of the current music industry. Really, it's a technology company, but it's part and parcel of musicians' lives. You are participating in that. So there are multiple tiers when you say the industry. I mean, even the industry is a very nebulous term. You know, it's a bunch of separate industries which we collect together and call the music industry. But, you know, there's also a kind of simplified rhetoric that's like, well, the music industry is just evil. Everyone there's toxic, and, you know, all the managers are out to screw you over, and the whole place, you know, that's oversimplistic too. But there are also signs and awareness that, you know, the way that certain elements of the music industry work are not working for musicians in terms of their health and well-being. We can see a number of examples of this. I'll give you two very recent examples. You probably saw the Brits this Saturday with Ray and the amount that Ray's just won on the Brits. Now, Ray was the one a few years ago on Twitter famously coming out and saying, Polydor have kept me hostage, signed to Polydor. Why aren't they releasing any of my tracks? This is absolutely screwed up. This is devastating for me. I can't release my music. She was absolutely heartbroken. I remember reading that thread and being like, whoa, this person's heartbroken. There, the music industry is not working for her in terms of her health and well-being. Now, people that know more about her situation can delineate that more, but you can see that those practices are not working. Relatedly, after the death of Avicii, you know, Avicii's, you know, died by suicide as one of the biggest stars in electronic dance music. And a number of people came out, including Avicii's own family at the time, and said, what was his manager doing? What was happening? I mean, if you've watched the documentary Avicii True Stories that was on, it's an incredible documentary. I reviewed it for some journal a few years ago. I mean, it's like an allegorical morality tale of what happens when you push somebody to the extent that he was pushed. And, you know, admittedly, it's only a media representation. We don't really know what was going on in his life. But people were raising important questions around, what was his manager making ethical and appropriate decisions at the time of his death? Was that being handled appropriately? Now, they're two vignettes, like small vignettes that we see mediated through forms of popular media. We don't understand what's going on in those people's lives, and we can't pretend that we do. But what they show us is that there are features of this industry and the way that it's working with young people, many of whom are young people who are bringing vulnerabilities with them. They're bringing vulnerabilities because they want to share their emotion. Music isn't selling songs. Music doesn't sell products. Music sells emotions. That's what it sells. It sells people's lives and their stories. And you are talking about a huge, you know, infrastructure that is seeking to monetize, you know, sell that. And some of the practices are demonstrably harmful. Not all of them, some of them. And they're isolated instances. Maybe we can't say they're generalizable. Who knows? But there are features that need seriously looking at. You've just seen the misogyny in music report that's just been published by the UK Parliament. There are features that are not working for women working in the music industry now, and they need sorting out. And it is not helped by a kind of techno-positivism of happy people sitting on music panels, which I get sent to, where everybody talks the most utter waffle of how fantastic it is to be here, and you've got to have a smile on your face, and you've got to be so positive, and you've got to be pleased that you work here. No, that is finished. We're not happy about this, and certain of these features need fixing because they need to be made better, because we love music. We're here because we love music. We're not here because we think it. We're not selling toasters. We're not selling, you know, TV sets. We're here because we love this. That's the reason why we do this work.
But I think that is part and parcel of the issue, is that the minute things are monetized, they become a product. Sure. And it's very easy to lose sight when your, you know, income is all on that product product is actually a person with real feelings, real emotions, you know, their own thing going on, but they potentially are creating an income for thousands of people around them. And so there's so much pressure on that. It's just huge. I don't know how anybody handles it. I really don't.
And likewise, that's also taking place in the context where increasingly labels and musicians themselves increasingly don't really know how to monetize what it is that they're doing, because the labels don't have a clue. The labels don't pick up, major labels don't pick up artists when they're young and develop them. They wait until you're already successful and then leap into it, because they don't really know how to do it. Increasingly, the ability to market it depends on your ability to understand TikTok's algorithm. Who is here as a computer scientist that understands TikTok's algorithm about what content is going to get shared the most? Most music marketers haven't got a bloody clue what they're doing. They don't really know, because how on earth do you sell this product to consumers who have got used to the idea of spending £10 a month for every song on earth? How are you supposed to sell these people anything? You can't sell them a song for £1. You couldn't possibly do that. You could sell them a flat white for £3.60, but you can't sell them a song for £1. That is over. How do you monetize this? Musicians' incomes are awful. If you were deciding that you wanted to do music because you thought that you were going to earn a living, you are doing the wrong thing. I mean, as a slightly throwaway comment recently, I said, look, if you want to make money, go and work in McDonald's, because you'll earn more money than you will doing from music. And I thought, oh, that was a bit of a silly comment. So I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll go online and I'll look at average musicians' earnings and I'll compare them to the average salary of people that work in McDonald's. You will earn more in McDonald's, statistically speaking. You will. About around half of musicians in the United Kingdom earn under £10,000 a year. You would earn more money in McDonald's than you would doing that. I mean, it is astonishingly difficult to monetize this. And even over the weekend, you might have seen all these articles in The Guardian talking about the live music industry, because everyone told people years ago, oh, you know the way to earn money? Go and play live. As it turns out, you don't make any money doing that either. Because you don't get
not until you're selling out arenas.
Oh, sure. There's always a tipping point after. We're not talking about Taylor Swift or Rihanna or Drake. Yeah, sure. But it's like, it's like talking about footballers and talking. I don't know. I don't really watch football. I don't know who was it when I was on David Beckham. I don't know. It's like talking about football and talking about David Beckham. Most footballers aren't David Beckham. They're not.
No, that's it. No.
So there's a tiny percent of musicians' lives, and those lives become the case studies which educators and various other people use to have these discussions around musicians' careers. They are not generalizable to the vast majority of musicians' experiences, because they are the elite of an elite who are. And the thing is, they're suffering too. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, they're having a number of. You talk about the Lewis Capaldi thing. We talk about Avicii. They have a huge number of struggles too. It's not only like struggling musicians who are suffering, because in a way, of course, they're suffering because they want to be Drake and they're not. Like, it's not just that. The ecosystem is, not working for people from the top to the bottom. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, when you look at instances from the top and say, well. I remember after Beyoncé dropped that Lemonade album and everyone was like, oh, this is going to change music marketing because you don't need an 8-week marketing campaign anymore. It's like, no, Beyoncé doesn't need an 8-week marketing campaign. You do. You need an 8-month marketing campaign. It's like, what are you talking about?
It'd be nice to be Beyoncé, wouldn't it?
Come on.
I mean, one of the things that resided with me after I watched your class was you mentioned the correlation between what someone considers to be success with, their mental health around what they're doing. And that struck me as kind of like, I feel like that's in life in general sort of, benchmark is, what do you consider success to be? Is it that you get to make money from your hobby? Great, you're quite happy busking on the underground in London and making essentially minimum wage, but that's your job, and so you get to earn your money from that. Or is it that you have to be Beyoncé to be a success? And, that I found that really fascinating.
I mean, that is a study that we did. It was me, Sally Gross and Catherine Loveday, and we did this study where, as part of this, we were measuring people's mental health outcomes using this thing called HADS, which is the Hospital Anxiety and Depression Scale. And we measured their well-being using this World Health Organization well-being outcome measure. And we were trying to work out like what was influencing these levels amongst this, not a huge sample, a couple of hundred, but big enough, I suppose. And we were trying to work out what was influencing that, age, gender, career stage, what was leading to these differences between people in the sample size. And as you say, one of the biggest predictors of their mental health and well-being outcomes were, do you consider yourself to be successful or not? Yes, no, maybe, don't know. And the thing is that when you drill into that notion of success in music is completely subjective. It's whatever you want it to be. I mean, it's not, it's not going on a cooking, John Turode and maybe not Greg Wallace because he's a bit of a clown, but if John Turode tells you that your cooking's bad on MasterChef and he says, listen, your food tastes like cack, then maybe you're not that great at cooking. Someone says, oh, you're not doing that well in your career, or it's not really popping in that for you, or whatever, or they might say, wow, you're killing it right now, and you don't feel that you are. It's completely subjective. So you may be performing music at 100 capacity little venues, every couple of weeks, but you've built up a following. You're able, that following really support what you do. Your people's mums have never heard of you. You're never on the charts. You're never in New Music Friday, but you are earning a living doing your music. You're writing new songs. You're sharing them month to month, and you're just enjoying your life as a musician and cracking on doing other things. And you feel successful. Music is likely to provide you an enormous source of almost solely pleasure and well-being benefits derived from that. Sure. And even there, you might see it as your career. That's the thing, but you still feel successful in it. So it's not yes or no. But equally, if you are that exact same musician, but what you desire is a residency in Las Vegas with Calvin Harris, and you're not there, you're a failure. You see yourself as a failure. That's the point. It's not an objective failure. You see it as that. And that is likely to be hugely damaging for you. Now, the problem with this is that many musicians, particularly young musicians who are coming out, and particularly young musicians who are engaged in popular music, won't hand on heart realistically tell you that they want to just potter around and do a few gigs here and do a bit of this and carve out a small name for themselves. They often do want to be signed to a major, or even if they don't want to be signed to a major, they want to have that big following. They want to, I was speaking with somebody the other day on the phone and she was like, I want to be Mariah Carey. I was like, okay, I didn't say anything. I was like, yeah, sure. I get that, but wow, because as I say, you have to dream big. But the challenge is when this notion of success, when it creates this disjuncture between where you see yourself at currently and where you believe you feel that you might be or could be or want to be, where you long to be. As you say, that's not only true for musicians, that's people in many careers, because, when we dream of something, if we don't achieve those dreams, that's painful. Like, yes, there's many dreams we have in our lives that might be painful. We might dream of owning a home one day. Well, if you're under 30 and you live in the south of England, that's going to be extremely painful for you because it's unlikely to happen for you. Whatever, you might dream of having a large family. Well, if you can't buy a house until you're 32 and all you buy is a one-bedroom flat, maybe you might struggle to have. There's many things in our lives that are sources of pain. Like, of course there are. But yes, in the context of musicians that we're talking about, we're dealing with dreams, we're dealing with ambition, and we're dealing with subjectivities that are completely porous, that are completely blurred, and that are rooted in an industry that is based on dreaming and dreaming big. Well, sure, I want people to dream too, and I want people to go for it. And of course, you want to do it. That's what you want to do. Great, you should go and do it. But perhaps I seem negative. I don't know. But the work that I do is trying to say, look, let's look at the reality of what it is actually like to do this work, because it has multiple sides to it. It has good, but it has bad as well.
So do you think young artists should always have a plan B?
If you're asking me what would I tell my daughter if she wanted to be a musician, I'd tell her the exact same thing my parents told me, which is go to the best university you can and get yourself a decent backup. Jesus, am I glad that they told me to do that. I mean, I remember when I was, when I got signed to Sony, I was in the middle of my PhD. And I remember getting the money, getting my advance from Sony and being like, I'm done. I don't need to do this PhD. I'm going to be a rapper. I've just got signed to Sony. I'm taking my wife to Paris to eat in a Michelin-starred restaurant. I'm coming back and I'm recording an album. I'm working with Mike Skinner. I've got Ed Sheeran in my video. I've got Ellie Goulding sharing my tracks. I'm going to be massive. And I came back and spoke to my supervisor and said, so I'm going to drop out now. I don't need to do this PhD. What are you talking about? And he was like, well, you can, but you're here on like a funded scheme, you'd have to pay back all your funding. So you can't. And I was like, and I am so glad of that conversation now. When I look back on that now, I think, what were you thinking, you clown? You were just going to leave because you got signed to Sony, because you get excited, like, wow, I'm signed to Sony. Like, but that would have been dumb. Now I finished that, I have a PhD, blank. Okay, wow, I can go on and do some other things, and that's cool. And that's given me some freedom. If I had put all my eggs in the music basket, I would be bricking it. Because I'd be thinking, wow. And I know we've done interviews with musicians, even ones who are currently signed to majors in big deals, doing big things, who will say to you, when my advance runs out in 18 months, I need to get another one. And they're talking getting 150 grand advance, whatever publishing advance that they're looking for. You know, what seems like big money, although it's not actually big money, because it has to last them 4 years and they have to pay tax and managers. They were like, if I don't get one, what am I going to do? Like, yeah, I could, maybe I could do mix engineering sessions for people or start mastering. And they're like 40 and they're like, this is all I've done since I was 20. This could all vanish in 2 years tomorrow for me.
Scary, isn't it?
Do you want that to be all your eggs in one basket? I am so glad. My mum applied me to uni. My mum filled out my application forms for me. My mum said, you're going to go to... My mum, when I was 5, my mum took me to Cambridge and said, you're going here. I was like, I don't even know what Cambridge is. We didn't live anywhere posh. I was like, I don't know what that means. When I was 17, she filled out my UCAS form. She said, I found you a course. I found you at Cambridge College. I'm going to apply you here. Great. Thank God I got in. Like...
Thanks, Mum.
Cheers. Thanks. What the hell does a 17-year-old know about anything?
I love that.
God.
Parents know best,
well,
always.
Maybe some do. I don't know whether all do, but yeah, maybe my mum's just a Jedi. I don't know, but But yeah, in terms of like having a backups, like we're currently doing this. I'm currently writing this thing now where I'm talking about like the concept of music education and like what should music education be, and this notion that like, if you are running, I mean, I do wonder about some of this like educational infrastructure currently that exists where you're encouraging young people who are dreaming big to come in and say, come and do this course and you can be a musician at the end of it. But those people know full well that the vast majority of people in that room will not earn a sustainable income as musicians because the data shows you that they won't. Now, some might, in which case, great. But the question is like, what do we have a responsibility to equip people with that when they leave, music provides you with so much. Like, look what it's given me in my life. Like, I know music gives you so much skills about how you work with people, how you understand people's emotions, how you share, how you do X, Y, and Z. It gives people so much. And you can see other high-risk, high-reward industries are currently saying, what should we be teaching people? Look at what the FA does. Football is another interesting example. You take kids who are 12 and you put them in the Arsenal Academy and you say, hey, when you leave here, you're going to be... I don't know, it shows my age, I don't watch football. Thierry Henry, I don't know footballers, man. I'm out of this game now. But right, and then when they're 15, it's like, oh no, you're not, bye. You're out. Now, at the very least, you're out when you're 15. A lot of musicians don't clock this till they're 25, 28, 32, that they're not going to be this anymore. And okay, by then it's like, wow. But the FA are doing a bunch of things where they're trying to do skills training for people in football academies because they're trying to equip them with skills that, okay, you are unlikely to play for Man United. Dream that you will. Go for it. Absolutely go for it. But don't get spat out the other side, heartbroken and wondering what it is you're going to do. The NBA are doing the same. They're trying to work out why so many basketball players, after they retire, are bankrupt. You know the number of basketball players that retire from the NBA and end up bankrupt within 5 years? So many. They don't have money skills. They haven't been prepared for this because they've been 17, drafted in the NBA draft.
And that's all they've focused on.
Become Michael Jordan, great. Well, then 5 years out of it, what's going to happen? Academia is another one, right? The percentage of people with PhDs that become university professors, tiny, absolutely tiny, like less than 10%. And you're going to encourage all these people to come and do PhDs because you want them to be lecturers. And at the end of it, be like, oh, as it turns out, guys, there are 3 jobs advertised this year in the whole country in your field of history. And you are really going to struggle to be a history professor, even though that's your dream. Do we have a responsibility to tell them about what else they might be able to do with the many skills they've acquired in the thing that they love? I kind of think we do.
Yeah.
Music is no different.
The music school one is, I have a slight bugbear with the introduction of foundation courses at some of these music schools, where I've had students before go to audition for the degree. I've had a feeling that they're not going to be offered a place on the degree. I've seen people who are more equipped for that place. They've gone on, they've not been offered, but then they get offered a place on a foundation course instead. Now, this university knows full well that that person is unlikely to get to the end of a year-long foundation course and be equipped enough to be able to do the degree. Right. But it feeds into giving them that dream and almost nurturing that dream that for me feels like actually they need a little bit of taste of reality at this point.
Well, and it speaks to a whole bunch of things around incentives in education more broadly. I mean, I could talk a lot about problems around incentives in university education in the UK more generally, but even in the context of music, for example, I mean, there are a number of music organisations, many of whom I actually really like, and I really like the people that work and run them. But for example, where you can pay that organisation to do radio plugging for you. You know, that it's X amount, whatever, £1,000, multiples of thousands, and you can pay them to pitch you to publications, to blogs, to websites, to Spotify playlists, to whatever. And if you've got the money, they will do it. Now, there is no judgment as to quality as to whether you'll actually get on a Spotify playlist or actually get a feature in, not Pitchfork anymore because that's gone, but whatever, Accelerator, Pigeons and Planes, I was going to say Vice, that's gone too. Wow, everything's going. But there's no judgment as to whether you'll actually get it. It's like, have you got $2,500? Cool, then I'll pitch you. And they think, oh, I'm getting pitched to Spotify players. I don't think that's on. I don't think that's on because there's no judgment as to whether that might happen or not. Now, all of this, the music industry is the dream industry. That is what it is. It is the myth-making dream industry that's full of people telling made-up stories about made-up excitement that is selling myths and dreams to people. Now, much of that is not toxic and dangerous. Much of that is enjoyment, it's entertainment, it's fun, it's people's life. You know, I'm not being nego about the whole infrastructure, but it is, without question, a dream industry. It's selling dreams and it's monetizing people's dreams. Now, what I'm saying is you have often huge inequalities of power dynamics between older, often, record label executives, managers, X, Y, and Z, who are, you know, metropolitan, plugged in, living in these cities, working with these young people for whom music just comes and goes. Listen for 10 seconds, now not feeling it, bang, bang. These people are plugged into a matrix of labels, publishers, live agents, booking agents, and plugged into a world that these young people, often with their fragilities that they bring with them, that they're trying to share, come into at a very young age, who are just caught up in this whirlwind of dreaming where they're seeking to make it their life and make it their career. And increasingly people are saying, we need to understand more precisely and with greater care and with greater empathy and understanding what it is that we are all doing for our work here and how we do it, working with the groups that we work with. That's all it is. It's not even I'm having a downer on this or I'm being arsey or negative about this. It's not that. It's about like the ethics of care and responsibility, working with people who we owe that care and responsibility to. It's really as basic as that.
Yeah. There's such a huge topic. I feel like I could go on asking you questions for the entirety of the day.
Sure, and I enjoy talking about it, so I'm happy to do it. As you can tell. So many other questions, but our time is running out. But where can people find out more about you and what you do and read all the stuff that you've written? Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, I would say that there are a number of like really, really good interventions that are launching now, and I would advise people to check them out, to take a look at them as opposed to necessarily looking at me first. So there are, Music Minds Matter is a helpline that's just been launched. It's actually become its own standalone charity about help musicians now. But there's a number of organizations, whether it's Music Support, whether it's Tonic Rider, whether it's all of these people that are BAPAM who are doing brilliant things working to try and make this space better and healthier. The Calm Zone, I've just seen that Nadine Shah's partnered with the Calm Zone this morning, and she's talking about suicide in music. I mean, there is a lot of fantastic work that is being done, and people that are interested in this topic, I would advise check them out, because I am not a clinician, I am not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist. So the practical side of what that looks like is being done by others who are in a different space, and I respect and am interested in what they're doing. Mine is from a kind of scholarly perspective, where I'm asking questions of this space and trying to prod and interrogate the working lives of people in it, and asking those questions that may feed into that or whatever, then that's fine. So if you want to follow the work that I do, you can just put like George Musgrave in speech bubbles, I guess, in Google, and you can find it. So on my university page, all my publications are at the bottom, and you can see them. The majority of them are open access and free to read because of partnerships that the university I work at has with publishers. So publication titles, for example, that you can look at, we have The Dark Side of Optimism, Can Music Make You Sick? The project we're doing in Denmark at the minute is called When Music Speaks, and that's a kind of 4-part project that's coming out over the course of the next year or so. And you can find all those publications that way, or like on Twitter, it's like at Dr. G Musgrave, and I'll tweet like mental health and wellbeing stuff relatedly through there. And there's a number of other people like who are doing really like fantastic and interesting stuff in this space. Jonas Varg in Norway. There's a bunch of people that are doing really insightful and interesting stuff on this topic that I would encourage people also to check out, because it's it's a big and interesting space, and people have got like different takes on where they're going with it. But the thing is, it is all driven, regardless of how you sit on it, regardless of causality, regardless of how you understand X and Y. Everybody that's working in this space actually shares the same thing, which is they want musicians' lives to be better. Like how they go about it and what that looks like may differ, but ultimately we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. And many people are doing that from a point of like real empathy and care and understanding. We might critique this methodology here, or we may critique this X, Y, and Z here, but ultimately people are all looking for the same thing, because we love music. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's the thing. We want it to be a good, positive force in the world. We don't want it to be a source of negativity.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much,
no
George.
worries.
It's been an absolute delight speaking to you
No worries.
today.
Thank you for having me.
So that was George. And as we said, it's a very different topic, isn't it?
It was. But I have to say, the first thing we did after we spoke to him was absolutely Googling to find out.
Absolutely. That's, you have to.
Find the videos of him rapping.
Yeah.
And bless him, he looks very young in those videos.
And
you'll all be doing that now.
You will. And but it's worth, I still think it's incredible that he was doing that and doing a PhD at the same time. Like, that's just
unbelievable.
Amazing.
Unbelievable. The amount of time that takes, just insane. Just insane that you could be doing both. And some really great advice there about, sometimes we feel like it's almost like a cop-out to have a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're not fully committed, then forget about it. You're never going to make it unless you commit yourself fully. Like that I feel like that's often the advice. Like, if you want to go for it, you should just go for
Absolutely.
it. Throw all your eggs in that basket and just really dedicate yourself to it. That's the only way that you'll succeed. So it was actually quite refreshing to hear someone say, no, why would you do that? Because that could be all over. And then what do you do with your life?
Exactly.
Like, no, be realistic about it. Have something else, so that if that doesn't pan out, or if you decide that is not for you, like you're not enjoying it, there's something else that you can use, and you can step into another role, and you're prepared for that.
Absolutely. And, I kind of have had the mindset myself in the past where it's like, don't place limitations on yourself. Like, you've got to dream big and you've got to go for it full in. But you're absolutely right. And he's right. Like, what do you do if that doesn't work out? Because, when you think about the music industry, and I know he said that's a huge umbrella term that covers lots of different parts, but when you think about people that are, professionals on stage, performing, touring, releasing albums, like, it's a very small group compared to, it's like actors as well. It's a very small percentage of people that actually make it to the top.
Absolutely.
So having, I'm going to do my music, but I'm also going to study an Open University degree in my spare time, so that if I don't make it, I've got a career that I can fall back on,
Yeah. And absolutely. And to be honest, I find it a similar situation when it comes to the theatre world, to acting and to, musical theatre. There are a lot of people, and I would count myself as one of them, that very quickly discovered that actually the life of a full-time performer is not actually giving the pleasure that we anticipated it might do. Because in order to live that lifestyle, you have to be knocked back several times. You have to be prepared to take lots of no's before you get a yes. And then the pay is not actually that great. In theatre in particular, in comparison to like if you become a multi-platinum selling artist, you know, in the pop world, obviously you're going to rake in the money. But you could be a top billing musical theatre performer in the West End. You're never going to make that sort of money from that work.
Oh, yeah. It's
And so it's not for everybody, you know, and I think recognizing that is a strength. Recognizing that actually I like my home comforts and I want to buy myself a house at some point in my life before I hit 65. And, you know, I might want something a little bit more steady or a little bit more local or whatever. It's not for everybody to live that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Both in the music industry and also, you know, the stage and performing industry there too. It can be depressing being told no over and over again. You know, it can make you feel
It could
really
be soul
crap about
crushing.
yourself.
Yeah. Soul crushing. Like all that constant no, no, no. And, you know, I think an episode or two ago you mentioned about, or I can't remember who we were speaking to now, but it was a case of, we were talking to Bob Marks, and it was the case of like the person, it didn't matter what they sung or how they acted, they just didn't look right, and so they were never going to get the role. And it's like,
that's it.
You may find yourself in that position quite often, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't go and take another voice lesson or an acting lesson. It's just, those are the genes you got, and they didn't fit the role. And so that, I have a lot of respect for people that do stay in the industry and work, because you need to be really mentally resilient to make it these days.
Absolutely.
Especially now with social media.
Oh gosh, yeah. And it's so easy to judge people online, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And people could be harsh.
People can be
really
downright
harsh.
nasty.
Yeah. But I do think there's something in, you know, anytime somebody turns what is essentially a hobby into a career, I do wonder whether that immediately takes some of the pleasure away. Like, you know, I had a friend at school who was a great swimmer and she loved swimming and she swam all the time. But when she got to a certain age and they started really training her for Olympic standard, and she was she was at the pool at like 4 a.m. before school, and then back to the pool straight after school, like 5 times a week. And then at the weekend, she'd be doing galas and things. When it got that intense, suddenly she started almost begrudging going. And suddenly it just didn't give her that pleasure anymore. And, you know, only a few people make the Olympic team. And she ended up not being one of them. And yet she dedicated years of her life to that. I think that transferring something from kind of pleasurable hobby that I do in my spare time to this is my full-time job always adds that level of pressure that potentially can take away some of the pleasure that you get from that thing.
You come to resent it because something that you did because you loved it is now you need to make money. You got to live, you got to pay the mortgage, you got to pay the bills, and so suddenly you've got to do it because you've got to make that money. And so it does kind of suck the joy out of it, I think. And, you know, when I started teaching, like I had a full-time job that went part-time. So I had a backup plan. If my teaching fell through, I had that part-time job that was paying the bills, paying the mortgage. And like, I was very lucky that things worked out and I was able to go full-time into the voice world. But I still had that backup plan, whether I realized it at the time or not. It was there. And I think it almost took some of the pressure off the teaching gig, because I didn't, oh my God, I have to pay the mortgage and I've only got 2 students this week. Like, it took that pressure away, so I was able to enjoy it more. Maybe that translated into how I taught, had more fun, and it was a bit more relaxed versus like, right, come on, more students, money, money, money. Pay the bills, you know?
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. I agree. I think it comes as well when you want to become a voice teacher. If you've been doing something else and then you're transferring into that career, it can be exciting to take that on as a full-time thing. But you're right, it comes with a lot of pressure because you are self-employed and you have to manage the ups and downs of income, which can be incredibly stressful if you've got rent to pay and you've got bills to pay and all of those things. And then suddenly the thing that should be bringing you pleasure becomes a source of stress. It's really, I mean, this topic is something we could just talk for hours on, but I just think it's really valuable to understand that predicament so that we can be kind to ourselves, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think understanding it allows you to be more realistic with what's achievable, because even with social media and viral videos and things like that, it still takes time to establish a business. And yeah, you could make a lot of money quickly these days if you get the right thing in the right place, but to create a sustained long-term income that's not just like a flash in the dark when you hit something, like a trend or something like that, it does take time. So having something to fall back on that takes the pressure off. And when you were talking there, I was thinking, is this why like some performers branch into teaching, because they know it's like their backup plan for when their performance career ends, they can just go into teaching and teach off their name, which is a good strategy as well.
And I think it is a great strategy. I think all performers should consider doing something like that, because it gives them that, if the performing opportunities dry up, you're not left with, wondering who you are and what you're doing. Yeah. You have something else you can put your energy into.
And also you could, you have your name as a performer as an attraction for the business, like that can be quite attractive to people, oh, you're a working performer or professional musician, that people will find that attractive and will be drawn to that as a business.
Absolutely.
So it's a great way to establish your business for when you do decide, like, I've had enough of the performing world, I want to just step back and just help other people on their path, kind of thing. I think it's a great thing. Something else though that I took from George's conversation that I really, really loved was thinking about the definition of what success is.
Yes.
Because as he said, like, if I think of like I want to be a pop star, like my immediate thought is the Celine Dion, the Beyoncé, the Mariah Carey at the peak of their career, $500,000 a show for 90 minutes. But there's so many levels underneath that are still really successful. But you immediately are drawn to like, I'm going to be the next Celine Dion,
Yeah. And just kind of lowering your expectations a little bit might make you happier, basically.
But you can still have, I mean, like we talked to another guest yesterday, she was talking about how some of her students release a song every 4 weeks on Spotify. And like they hit 1 million streams, I think she said, last year. So like, that's success. That's amazing. Like they're having success. They've got a core group of fans that are following them. Yeah, they're not Celine Dion on stage getting $500,000 for a show, but they're still being incredibly successful and they're doing something that they love,
Yeah.
And if we can adjust our perception of what we think success is, like as you say, we could be really happy and fulfilled and, doing what we love. I feel successful. I feel happy. I'm putting my music out into the world. I'm changing people's lives through it, etc. And then we become fulfilled and happy, and that's good for our mental health.
Yes,
getting my soapbox.
I agree. I know. And I think this is a topic we need to come back to, Tom.
Absolutely.
I think we could do a whole other episode on things you can do to make life happier for you as a voice teacher.
Absolutely. I mean, mental health is such a big topic. And, everybody's talking about it in different places. And we've talked to guests already in the season about mental health and the benefits of singing as a singer, different from the topic George was talking about as in professional musicians. But like mental health is so important, and mental health for voice teachers as well. It's something that you don't hear a lot of talk about, but it is just as important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we'll have to have a conversation about that.
I was going to say, let's schedule that in at some point.
Yeah.
We'll add that to our list of things to talk about in more detail another time.
Yeah.
But we better wrap up for today.
I know.
Otherwise, but this episode's going to end up 3 hours long because we could go on forever.
These episodes usually are 3 hours long, but with careful editing.
I know. Even when I edit them down, I'm like, well, I can't lose that bit. It's too interesting.
I know. This is the problem. We pick such amazing people. Like, everything is interesting, and we end up like, well, like, we need to cut something.
I'm leaving it in.
Yeah.
Just listen on double time, and then it'll be a half-hour episode. It'll be fine.
But yeah, another great episode, I think, personally. I may be a bit biased because it is our podcast, but I think it's a really interesting topic.
We're fantastic.
You were amazing, darling.
Oh, you too, darling.
Oh, thank you. Oh, well, on that note.
Well, I was going to say, if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on our fabulousness in the next episode, then you need to make sure you're subscribed up. How do people do that, Tom?
Yeah, so make sure wherever you're listening to this that you find the follow or the subscribe button and you give that a little click and then you get notified when the episodes come out. And as we've said before, we are a video podcast as well. So if you want to get onto YouTube, just look for Vocal Advancement Podcast and you can watch the videos of me and Heather and our guests chatting. And make sure you give them a wee like and a wee thumbs up because that'll help other people find it. And yeah, we'll put some details in the show notes as well about how to find us in various places. And yeah, we have some more interesting people still to come, though, don't we?
I love it. Yeah, we've got some great stuff to come.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about the courses that we run at Vocal Advancement, you can visit our website and we'll put all the details of that in the show notes, won't we, Tom?
Yeah. And actually,
I said that with authority, like I knew that I was going to be doing it. I don't do any of that.
Well, I'm putting that on your task list now.
Someone will put those in the show notes, not me.
But yeah, and I was going to say as well, actually, you know, if people listening have suggestions for topics or suggestions for speakers they'd love to see us cover, then love to hear from you. Drop us an email, hello@vocaladvancement.com, and let us know, because we're always looking for new people to talk to and the kind of topics to cover. So if you've got an idea, yeah, drop a line because we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was our episode. Fabulous as always.
So we will... I'm always fabulous, aren't we? So we will see you next time for more fabulousness.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
Stay tuned. Bye.
Bye-bye.